Treen. Welcome to Algo Daily.
Thanks.
So, Harold, you are a very established software engineer. You have led many open source and non-open source commercial projects. You have a track record of software engineering employment in many prestigious software engineering companies. Why don't you tell us about how you got here?
Whoa. I actually didn't want to be a software engineer originally. I originally applied to university as a mechanical engineer who was interested in doing robotics. And then the first year of engineering was general. The second year, I enrolled in a program called Applied Mathematics and Engineering because they had a robotics program. And I thought robots in the title means I will build a robot. And then after a semester of that, I made some friends and we were studying. And my friends were like, this is way too much math. And I was like, it's fine. And they're like, we're going to switch into computer engineering. And at that point, I had done like a little bit of coding in high school. I built some websites. I'd, done some Lego Mindstorms. And I didn't have like a huge sense of being a software person, but they were nice people and seemed very passionate about computer engineering track being a good choice, and I followed them. And I think the next summer after that, I think I ended up at Microsoft. Or no, the summer after that, I ended up doing QA. Summer after that, I did Microsoft.
Yeah. So what exactly enticed you about computer engineering? Obviously, the fact that there were classes in it helped pique your interest, but what made you stay in the field? A lot of people get a first bite and then they just literally will switch to anything else as soon as they get C++.
Right away. Yeah. I think the fact that the first programming experience I did was robotics class. Like our computer programming class, the final project was to program a robot to like follow lines and like do all that stuff. And so being able to write some code and then see a robot like perform what I had told it to do is super cool. And I think that's the same with websites. I've always just found it really interesting to like write a couple lines of text and then boom, the whole screen's red or full of rainbows So I like that quick feedback cycle from putting something in the text, seeing a real life change happen. Makes me feel very powerful, and it's like a superpower.
I can totally relate. That instant feedback is pretty paramount to learning any kind of new skill, or like, I feel like it's something with programmer brains. We like that instant feedback. That's why a lot of programmers are musicians, for instance. You play a key or you like play a chord and you get that instant recognition that you did something right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So did you get your QA engineer role?
Yeah. So I switched from math to computer engineering. And then that summer I was reading the newspaper and I had been just like working as a busboy at a restaurant. And I was reading a newspaper article about this company in Toronto that does like mobile development, and they work with all these different brands to like build their mobile apps. It sounded super cool. I went to their website and they had a page specifically for internships saying that they like really do a lot of internship stuff. And I was super excited about it. I wrote up a resume, went directly to their office, went up to reception and said, hey, I read about you in the newspaper. You seem really cool. Can I take a tour of the office? And here's my resume.
It's very bold. Nowadays, most people trying to break in will just send out 500 resumes on Indeed.
That's how I got a job. That's how I got my restaurant job, was I just printed up like 50 resumes and then went into these restaurants and just like handed them my resume.
Oh.
Yeah, they're like, we're not going to give you a tour, but we'll take your resume and let you know if we have anything. And then a couple weeks later, they emailed me and said they wanted me to come in for an interview. And I interviewed for a QA position. And that summer, after a couple more weeks, I got it. And it was like, that's the best when you get your first software job and then you can like point at it and say like, look, I'm legitimate.
Yeah. Were you automating tests or were you doing any manual testing?
Yeah. So I was mainly doing manual QA. So like downloading apps onto a phone and then like going through a list of test cases and like checking that it worked on all the different platforms and all the different phones.
Yeah.
And they were doing this all by hand. And I just started automating a couple of things. Like I wrote a script that, you have to test against 5 different Android devices. So my script, you could just like plug in all the phones and run it. And it would just push the build to all the different phones. Yeah, it was a lot quicker than manually going into each phone and like opening the app. And it would also like send an intent to the Android app to like open it. So like not only would it be installed, it would be like pre-opened and you could like pick up the phone and start testing. And then I started doing automated tests, like running sort of how like there's Selenium for web browser testing where you can like say, click on this button and then assert that you're on this page. I started running tests to do that in Android. At the end of the summer, they hired someone from Microsoft to come and be like a QA expert. And I showed him all this stuff I had, and he was like, this is so cool. And he actually ended up writing an article for their blog like a month later and gave me credit for all like the stuff I built. And yeah, so it was a great experience. It's cool to just have like that freedom to just like build automation stuff. By the end of the summer, I was like, I can manually test this stuff, or can I go and do like the automation projects I want to do? And they're like, yeah, go do some automation. And that just gave me a really good reputation at the company. So then the next summer, I wanted to do a 12-month internship as a software engineer, and they gave me another interview, but pretty much just looked at that experience and like, okay, we'll take you back. So that was my foot in the door.
And it's been uphill since.
Uphill since, I guess.
So that year-long position was a co-op, or was that a full-time position?
I did second year, and then I did summer of QA, and I went back to school, and then Microsoft came to our campus and was accepting resumes, and I originally was just like, that's silly, I'm not going to write up a resume, like, they're not actually going to hire anyone from the school, like, I know how this works, they take all the resumes, and then they disappear, and you never hear from them, but my friend was adamant, he's like, no, why, like, let's just go and try. So I ended up like quickly updating my old resume, printing it out in the computer lab, going to this session, handing it in. And then a couple weeks later, a bunch of us got phone interviews from Microsoft. And then me and my friends studied really hard. And then we got flown out to Seattle to do on-site interviews. And I was able to talk about, I got considered for a software development engineering test role. And so being able to talk about my co-op and say like, I did this automation, I did this, I think they found that really impressive. And so I ended up getting the summer internship there.
For a lot of people watching or listening, Microsoft seems like this unreachable, big name, big corporate name. Do you think that getting Microsoft as your second software engineering employer helped your confidence, helped with possibly if you had imposter syndrome at the time, or if you were lacking any confidence at the time, did having that brand name boost your belief in yourself?
I don't know for myself. I definitely felt more confident that people would take notice of my resume if they saw a company that, Big M as they call her. But I actually, so after doing that summer internship, that was like a whole other thing because I actually ended up not getting a return offer from Microsoft.
Wow.
But it was kind of fine because after that internship, I knew I wanted to do a year-long internship, and I couldn't have done that at Microsoft. The company I worked at in Toronto doing that program. And so I had already figured out what I wanted to do for the next year, and it didn't really matter as much.
What made you, looking back, were there any things that you felt like prevented you from getting the return offer? That's obviously not something anyone ever wants, is to just to not get a return offer after an internship.
Yeah, I think when I went, I had this very like coder monkey view of the world where I was like, I'm going to show up. Being good at your internship means showing up, taking whatever task they give you, like completing them, and then going and getting a new task, completing it, and then going in a new task and completing it. And it was kind of like my goal was to be as good as possible at finishing the task that they gave me.
Right.
And I thought I was doing pretty well at that. But then the feedback I got was that it's not enough to just like go and ping your mentor and be like, what to do now? Like eventually you need to fill the role of domain expert who they've hired you, and now you need to figure out what the problems are and you need to find the solutions to it rather than just like being a puppet to, go and complete stuff. So after that feedback, it was really good because I started, forming my own relationships with the PM and the developer on the project I was working on and the other engineers on the team. But at the end of my internship, they're like, you absolutely like stepped it up after that midpoint review. You've been like crushing it. And like, if we saw this continue on, we would totally want you back. But we would have wanted to have seen this from the start to like really feel confident. And so it was a weird thing. It effectively made it sound like I was out of the running after that midpoint review. And so like no matter of hustling would have like made up for that. But I don't know, that was the official piece of paper what it said. But then speaking to my mentor, he was like, dude, you did great this summer. Like, I totally would have wanted you back. I think that there's just like been a lot of organizational shifts and like our manager is a bit on edge about like hiring the wrong person because like she's kind of under the microscope right now and doesn't want to take any risks. So that context was really helpful to like give me a boost of confidence and help me distance a bit from the fact that I didn't get it.
I think that there's a lot to unpack there. I think at Squarespace, where we met, you were always someone who showed a lot of initiative. In fact, you're probably viewed by many, if not most, as someone who is the opposite of, it's a derogatory term, but kind of a code monkey that just takes tasks off the backlog, does it, merges the PR, and moves on to the next one. When a lot of the people I mentor ask me if software engineering is too saturated, it is seemingly too saturated for people who are just, like I said, taking stuff off the backlog, doing it, and then just silently moving on. There is definitely a lack of leads, of people who can design really good systems, of people who can think outside the box, foresee problems and things like that. And you seem to have carried that kind of a mindset of what can I contribute beyond just the day-to-day tasks. But let's talk about after Microsoft. So at this point, you're a senior or a junior?
No, I was still in college. Senior, right.
Senior in the university, at Queen's University.
Yeah.
So the semester after Microsoft was your final year? Or second or final year?
After Microsoft, I went straight to my internship, and then I had one more year after that.
One more year after that. And let's fast forward to graduation. So is there anything you want to call out from your final year at Queen's?
No, I think so. After I went from Microsoft to my year internship, and the year internship was like the most learning I ever. So I worked at the same company. It was called Extreme Labs, but shortly after joining, they got acquired by Pivotal Labs, which was a natural fit. Like their names even show like Extreme Labs, Pivotal Labs, like they modeled themselves a lot after Pivotal. And so that was just like a year of test-driven development and like pair programming and working with really smart people who like really knew their stuff. And so like to this day, I don't think there's anywhere I've learned as much as I did there, just like building all these different things for different customers. And that's also probably where I got into the web development stuff, because I had tested apps before and like done app development. And so I went in thinking I'd kind of be put on like an Android project. And that's like Extreme Labs was a very mobile heavy place. But then I happened to get put on a web project, and it seemed counterintuitive at the time. I was like, do I want to be doing web? Do I kind of like Android? But it gave me just so much more experience to do like backend development in Ruby and like these general purpose programming languages, and then like JavaScript you can do a lot of systems programming with nowadays, but also doing like front end development. It just gave me a very broad set of tools to pick up and sort of set the trajectory for me.
And were you there when they got acquired?
Yeah.
You were there during the acquisition.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Oh man, I don't know. I feel like it was just an announcement one day, and then there was like maybe a party. As an intern, I think I didn't get the same view of things, or like I didn't have stock options where they're like sending me emails like talking about share prices or anything. And like we got to move offices, so like they had already been planning on moving us, but then once we got acquired, they were like, you have so much more money now. Like just to give you context, like the budget we now have just to buy chairs for our new office is what we were going to spend for our whole office build out for the acquisition. So yeah, it was cool seeing like how much extra resources you can get. Yeah, and Pivotal at that time was owned by EMC, I think. So there was like a big company.
Large company, yeah.
Moving to the new offices, there was like, they got better snacks. And
Did you, by this point, you've experienced a little bit of small company and big company environments and programming setups. Did you notice anything different? Did you develop a taste for larger companies versus smaller companies at this point?
Yeah, I definitely, I don't know, Microsoft was interesting because I was working on headers and footers for the Word web apps, which is just like you have this little feature on this giant project, and there's people all around the office like working on different things. And yeah, I definitely didn't feel like I left with as much like meaty experience. Like you just spend so much more time when you have to recompile like all of the Word web apps. It's just your whole iteration cycle is so slow. But like at these startups, you're like building a brand new Rails app or something, and everything's still speedy and fast, and you can like write crappy code and then like fix it and then just like experiment with a lot of things. So I think that was like a good environment to learn in, was a bit of the smaller company where like the stakes weren't as high, the speed was really quick, and you could try a lot of things. Yeah.
You seem to, in addition to the whole taking initiative mindset, you seem to embrace learning as the driver for choosing what to do next. If I'm not mistaken, after Pivo, was it Recurse immediately after, or was it something else after?
So then after Pivotal, I did a year of school, and then I decided that I wanted to do another internship.
Right.
Internships are these like short bursts at a company that you could just like go learn a bunch of stuff, work on a bunch of new things, not have a ton of expectation on you. And so then after college, I went to and then moved to Vancouver thinking like if I do an internship, then I'm not going to be like beholden there. Like I don't want to take a full-time job and then have like a 6-month stint on my resume if I don't like it. So yeah, I ended up moving out to Vancouver and joined this other sort of web like sale, like e-commerce company called Mopify, and did what ended up being 8 months there. And then after that was when I was like, I need to go on a big vacation.
Yeah. And Mopify, that's where you met Dan Bader, who is the creator of Real Python.
Yeah, Dan Bader has worked at Mopify in the past, and we had a bit of an overlap there. So yeah, that was like a very small company in Vancouver, but like super talented, interesting people. We also had David Shea, who wrote CSS Zen Garden, which is like one of the early sort of like web development blogs. So that was cool. We had a good little crew.
It's really interesting. You see a lot of these characters at smaller companies who could work for big tech if they wanted to, but a lot of times they just prefer smaller environments where perhaps the compensation isn't as tremendous, but they get to optimize for the things that they actually care about, like learning new skills or meeting really cool people or building stuff from the ground up as opposed to maintaining legacy systems. But I want to talk a little bit about the Recurse Center because you decided to take a sabbatical. Were you burned out at this point, or was it just more for personal discovery, personal
I think
curiosity?
I've always had this weird view of working where it's like, I'm going to sign up to work at a company, I'm going to like sell my soul to them. And that's why I did all the internships where I need to formally acknowledge that I won't be here for a long time because if I don't stay for 8 years, I'll fail them. And so, yeah, once I got into the working world, I felt like I would never get out. So, yeah, I decided to go to South America I was planning to go for a year and just like travel the world for a year after graduating, And yes, that's where I ended up for a bit. And what originally started off as like all of South America and Europe turned into 6 months of just Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, which was super fun.
How do you think that affected you? What did you learn from that experience, or what did you gain from that experience?
I started working I did a bit of contracting while I did that. And there was a lot of like digital nomad type people that I saw on the road. So I got a feel for that type of lifestyle a bit, where you like work in these countries where like your spending power is so much stronger, and
if you're making like $2,000 a month,
you can
from your side from your project or whatever.
I was able to live off like $700 a month for like food and living and everything. Yeah, I don't know. It was interesting to see that. And also, like, I was doing some contract work. So it's kind of like being my own boss and like picking work up at my own pace. And I did some open source stuff and kind of got to like work on my own project and like go through the motions of getting that out and releasing it. So yeah, it was kind of a nice time to sort of like explore things at my own pace and not like feel a set schedule. Like I ended up staying for a month in Medellin, Colombia, and would just go to the coffee shop every day, like work on my side project a bit until I like got tired of that, and then would practice Spanish and then get another cappuccino and then like play some chess. And it was nice to sort of just like do everything at my own pace. And if I only felt like coding for an hour, then that's fine. If I felt like coding for 7 hours, like that was fine. I don't find that like during my day job, it feels natural to just code for an hour one day and be like, that's fine. I'm going to go and,
Right. Go explore.
Go for a walk most of the day. Even though that might be the most productive and like creativity inspiring way to spend your time.
That's so interesting to hear because many people will say they want to do what you did, which is take some time off and just kind of just explore for a bit, just figure out what you want to do in the future, long term, but also just try something different. But, the biggest fear is people are scared of not having enough money and getting set back in their career. This didn't seem to be a concern. So we talked about the money thing. So obviously, in a country where purchasing power isn't as strong, you were able to live off the contracting work. But what about, were you ever worried that you weren't on the same pace as some of your Queen's University classmates or anything like that?
A lot of people graduated and like went to work at Microsoft or like got jobs. I never really thought about that. I think like I was able to get these internships. I had Microsoft on my resume. I had like worked at these different companies. So I felt like I would have a strong value proposition when I went to go and work again.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing like a bit of side project stuff. So I felt like I was, keeping my skills fresh. Yeah. And everyone who I'd ever worked with was pretty like positive and were like, hey, if you ever like, I left that company, but I'm working at this company. Like, do you need a job? Like, I'll totally hire you. Yeah. And so that was kind of nice to have like having built some connections to look to and be like, okay, like worst comes to worst, like this person wants to hire me. So yeah, I think I had a sense that there were things to fall back on too.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about being in software engineering is there's in this current market, if you have some experience, there seems to be a good amount of a safety net as long as you have the skills. So we move on to Recurse Center. How did you decide do you apply to Recurse Center or how does that work?
So Recurse Center is a self-directed programmers retreat. It's like this space in New York where people can just come and work on whatever they want to work on and collaborate if that feels right. But it's all self-directed, no teachers, no instruction.
Not to interrupt, but there seems to be basically every engineer I've met who's graduated from Recurse Center, is it the Recurse Center or Recurse Center?
It's Recurse Center.
Recurse Center has been in probably the top 1%, 1 to 5% of programmers that I've worked with. Mm-hmm. Is there something self-selecting about the Recurse Center cohort? Do you think that talent develops there, or is it kind of like the kind of person who decides to go to Recurse Center is the kind of person who would naturally be driven to try to develop their programming skills? I also don't know if you've noticed the same thing.
The recursors are very like curious, smart, like friendly, standout people. I haven't worked with too many of them outside of Recurse professionally, and I feel like when I was at Recurse Center, I like worked mainly with people who are like still trying to learn. I don't know, I feel like at Recurse Center people are working on the things that they like know the least about, and so like a lot of people seem like they're just in like the beginning stages of learning something, but that could also be just like that they're choosing something. But I think like being a self-directed learner and not needing someone to like show you how to do something, like being able to learn and to develop skills without requiring any hand-holding or being able to like find the resources and make it happen for yourself is like a definitely valuable skill to have.
Absolutely. And now at Recurse Center, so you get there in New York City for the first time, I believe. Mm-hmm. What was that like?
So I actually had applied to Recurse Center while I was in Vancouver because I had a friend who had went there and like a bunch of people were talking and saying it was amazing. And it seemed like a really cool like post-internship like thing to do. But I actually got rejected. Like 15 minutes after sending in my application, they took the time to like email me back saying no. And I actually wrote a blog post about that where I like contrasted like the application I sent in that time and then the one I sent in while I was in South America.
There's a link to that.
Link to that in the show notes. But yeah, so I guess like motivation for going to the Recurse Center was that I was in South America coding alone, going to hostels, like being very transient. And so the idea of like being in a space with a bunch of other programmers seemed really interesting. And yeah, when I got there, I feel like I had been doing so much coding in South America that I was like, I don't really need to code a bunch. Like I'll just talk to people. And I spent a lot of time just like socializing and running workshops and pairing with people who wanted to learn React or building small features for my side project. I don't know. I feel like I come to Recurse to become a better programmer. And I don't know if I left thinking like I learned this new skill, I leveled up, but I think it just like introduced me to like a bunch of different things and made me an overall like more well-rounded person and gave me like exposure to a bunch of different things that people were working on and sort of just like expanded my knowledge of software engineering and like the whole world and ecosystem and things going on. And I think a lot of the value of Recurse is that like you get connected to this community. Like to this day, I can go and log into Zulip and message friends and like other people from my batch. Zulip is like the online chat that they use at Recurse. It's like an open source chat platform. So pre-Slack.
Okay.
Yeah, pre-Slack, post-Slack. I don't know. Similar time as Slack.
There seems to be a theme developing when we talk about how you got to where you are now, where there's been several points in your career so far, up to and including Recurse Center, where you could have monetized, where you could have optimized for money. Mm-hmm. You chose not to. Nearly every step. In fact, nearly every direction took you away from trying to, expand your compensation. What do you think your relationship with income was up to that point? Because, you can answer this however you want, but most new grads, they think I'm going to software engineering, and a good amount of them will probably be trying to get, a job at one of the big tech companies in order to get the 200, 300 and above salaries. What do you think made you not go after all? And the reason I say this is because you went to a very prestigious university. You could have continued on the Microsoft thing and just tried for another big tech company. You went to Recurse Center, which was not a profitable operation, and you also went to South America for a bit and didn't seek to optimize income there. Do you think there was something about your personality or perhaps your background that made you not really feel the need to make lots of money?
I don't know. I feel like maybe if I'd gone to like Waterloo or like a different school where like co-ops were a big thing, like I felt like I was ahead of the curve already at Queen's, because like the school I went to was in Canada. It's only like a small portion of Canadian like college students who are going and getting FANG jobs and stuff.
Right.
And I did get I was super when I realized like how much I was going to make at Microsoft for the summer, what I would normally it was just like so much more, and especially in US dollars. And so I don't know, it seemed like making a lot of money was something that wasn't even on my radar. It was like my criteria was like, am I getting real jobs? Yes. So that's like good. And I never had a real strong concept for like what people were making. I think in my QA job, I like asked around and realized that like the software engineers were making like $2 an hour more than me or something. But I don't know. It didn't really matter at that point. Also, I was coming from like working as a busboy, so like the fact that I was earning more than like minimum wage was pretty cool. Or so I think I just had like a very low bar. Also, like I grew up in a family where it was like my dad's like an organist, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so like they weren't like bringing home bank. Had very modest needs, and if anything, I think like I was more concerned with like saving money. So rather than like earning a ton of money, I was just like focused on how much I was saving. So like I lived with my parents during my 1-year internship, and that saved me a lot of money. And being in South America is super cheap, and so that saved me money. And I would always like take the bus or like bike, and I didn't take the subway a lot. And so I was like way more focused on how to conserve money rather than like make more money. Recurse was definitely weird because you're paying like New York prices to, I was like in a dorm room with like 3 other people in Bed-Stuy paying like $1,200 a month for my little bunk bed spot. And so that was like mind blowing that you could pay that much for rent. But I think just like access to the community seemed like a good selling point. And I knew that they would do some recruiting. Like they don't make money, they don't charge for the retreat, but they recruit for companies, and so that's how they make money. So it felt like more of an investment than something that was costing a bunch.
It sounds like the philosophy has been, a good amount of it has been setting the right expectations or low expectations. You were fulfilled and happy in all these roles because you had enough. And I think that's something that our generation has a difficult time grasping sometimes. So once Recurse is over, you've expanded your horizons, you've dabbled in a bunch of stuff. We haven't talked about ePubPress yet. ePubPress is your claim to fame. You are the creator of ePubPress, a open source library that allows you to, actually, why don't you describe it? How would you describe ePubPress to?
ePubPress is my side project for building ePubs from like a variety of Chrome extensions. So like turning web content into ebooks. And it came from I like loved RSS and loved reading the news. And I would like follow these different blogs. And anytime I wanted to consume news, I would just like scroll down the list of articles and just like open each article in a new tab. Sometimes I would consume this by just like keeping my browser open with like 60 tabs and just like going through each tab and closing it as I had read it. And then I bought a Kindle and I found Calibre, and there was like these tools available that you could send links from an RSS feed into an ebook. And that was pretty cool. It just felt a lot nicer. I felt like I consumed my internet content a lot faster by reading it on my Kindle. And so yeah, my motivation was just like, I want to read all my RSS and all the stuff that I read online, but in my Kindle. Yeah, I just wasn't really happy with what was available. Like my workflow of opening all these tabs didn't really fit with what other people had. Like you could either send an entire RSS feed to your ePub, like to a Kindle, but then you have like all these articles and you're just like skipping through the ones you don't want to read.
Yeah.
You could send like individual articles to your Kindle, but then you have like 30 books for the one session of news reading you want to do. And so yeah, I thought it would be cool to build something that would let you sort of build a custom newspaper. And that was what I did in South America. I was in a hostel and I was like, I've always wanted to do this. Like, what would the easiest thing be? And so I created a new JavaScript file. I like installed a package for requests to like make a query to the internet. Yeah, I made a new JavaScript file to make a query for like a news article, and then got the response back, and I like pulled out the response body and then I put it into like HTML parser.
Yeah.
And then once I was able to pull out the body tag, I found another library for parsing HTML and pulling out the article, and then I did like fs save file. And then from there, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Or I found like another library for taking snippets of HTML and like publishing an ebook. And so I was able to like write this little janky JavaScript file, went from pulling an article from the internet to writing an EPUB to disk. And then from there, I was like, okay, how do I make this API endpoints? How do I build this out a bit more?
You seem very excited about ePubPress.
Yeah, and then it was just a matter of like continuing to iterate. So like the first thing I got working was like you could download all these articles, but when you request a web page, you just get all the HTML. You don't get any of the images.
Right.
So you'd like lose all the images. So then I had to write extra code to parse the HTML that you download for all the image tags and like download those images and then save those in a separate folder. And then like once you're running this on a server, if you keep downloading images, you're going to like run out of your hard drive. So you need to like manage downloading it, building EPUB, and then like deleting all your images that you'd created. It's like all these little things. Sometimes you get a web page like in an EPUB, you're using XML, everything needs like an opening and a closing tag. In HTML, it's not quite like that. You can have like self-closing tags, so writing code to go through and filter all that out. Sometimes my content extracting library wouldn't do a perfect job, so I'd like write another module to like move stuff around and collapse paragraphs that were separated to massage it into a more extractable format.
So there were several technical challenges that you thought that came about as a result of a seemingly very basic project. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will ask how they could get into open source software, and it sounds like you just went ahead and created something that you wanted, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think that's a good approach for somebody who wants to expand their skill sets?
Yeah.
It seems like you learned a ton.
If I had sat down and been like, I want to build a web service and publish it to the Chrome store, I would have like quickly given up and been overwhelmed. But by just having these little goals of like, I wonder if I can download some HTML and then like save it to a file, and like going from there was a really easy way to sort of like take small steps towards what I wanted. It was nice to work on something that like directly impacted me. I think some people like try and talk around and find a problem to work on, or like find a new angle to work on something, but this was like very self-motivated, like something that I needed done for myself, and I didn't really care if it like solved all the problems or like if some random forum that someone formulated like didn't work.
As long as it works for you.
Yeah, so that was like a good baseline functionality to focus on.
You talked about this when you were applying to next job, which is Squarespace.
Yeah, I don't know, it became a talking point all over the place. I actually interviewed at Shopify, and one of their interviews is to like bring in a project that you've worked on.
Oh, nice.
And so I like brought in my laptop and I showed them how I'd written all these like regression tests for my like extraction module, and like I had done it TDD most of the way, and everything was like decomposed, and how it was like published to all these different platforms, and it was just like a really good thing to point to sort of like showcase my skills. You can't really do that if you leave a company. I can't like go and like get all this closed source software. Exactly. So it was nice to have something I can show off and own. Yeah, I don't know how much. I definitely like talked about it at different places. I launched it on the Chrome store and got like really good reviews. I think I definitely focused on making it reliable from the start. People had a good experience with it. To this day, it's got like 10,000 users and still going strong with its 4.9 review or 4.5 average review. And so I think that's like a good thing to point to, rather than just being like, I wrote this code, being like, I wrote this code and like a good number of people found it valuable. It's a good interview topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a favorite interview question?
There's like interview questions that actually force you to build stuff, which I think is nice. Like having someone actually write some HTML, some JavaScript, some CSS, and like build something small, and find those give really good signal because it's very straightforward. There's no like gotchas of like, that's not how you turn current into Celsius. Yeah, it's very like realistic, and like senior people will always can go really deep and like talk about layout thrashing and and like why they're talking about garbage collection or something. Right. Like, oh, I'm going to move this function out so that it like gets declared out here and reused instead of re-referenced. Interviewing is very hard.
Interviewing is very
it's hard to know. You could give an interview to someone and you've set it up to use React and they've used Angular, and then as they're writing Angular, I don't know what good Angular is, so yeah, I don't know. It's a hard problem, but realistic things that like are small and easy to capture. I actually used to think that the take-home problems were super fun, but then during my last round of interviewing, I was like, if a company asked me to do a take-home, that with like my full-time job, interviewing at other places, it's like way too much work. To take away,
you may not even get a response back.
It's great when I'm like fresh out of college and I got all this time on my hands and like, yes, I got Monday to Friday to like work on your side project, but it does become a bit much to put that much time into something.
Yeah. Well, Harold, we got to start wrapping up, but we've gone all the way up to your current role. We don't have to reveal where you currently work, but it is a large technology company that many people aspire to. What do you have to say to people who are either trying to break into software engineering or are trying to just get into a better role? We've talked about your trials and tribulations. We've covered your many internships and co-ops. We've covered open source software, and we've covered just how to have a learning and growth mindset. Mm-hmm. Do any of these things specifically stand out to you as being more important or less important in getting to where you are today? And do you have any closing words for people who might want to aspire to be a senior software engineer?
I don't know. It's hard.
It's a big question. It's a big question.
I don't know. I like looking back. I think the things that really got me through the door was showing up at that random office and handing in my resume. I don't know. And that was also just luck. Like, I think maybe one of the interns they extended an offer to ended up rejecting them unexpectedly. And so they randomly had this position open. I think just like you got to apply to so many places to just get that first place. And then even after that, like even after doing all these internships, like I would apply to Airbnb or something and get like an instant rejection. And even after like years of experience, it's not always like a shoe-in for every company. Yeah, and then like Microsoft, like I'm probably, if I had gone to their job portal and just like submit my resume, I don't think I would have necessarily gotten an interview. I think it was specifically that like a recruiter came to the school and like solicited resumes, that was really good for getting in the door. Using the connections, like Recurse has been a super solid place to get referrals, like reaching out to people and like getting their referrals. I've had friends like refer me to the recruiters they worked with at companies, and that's really good. I feel like anything to just make yourself stand out a little bit more than like a person who's submitting their resume online is like a really important thing. And then once you're in, just that's a whole other thing.
Some hard work, some focus, some dedication. Awesome. Well, Harold, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We will definitely link out to ePubPress, haroldtreen.com.
or .ca.
And thank you guys for tuning in. See you next time.